The date and birthplace of Noah's God, circa 1660-1680 BC. The massive cave system of Mount Dicta, the legendary birthplace of the Cretan Zeus. Dear viewers, another day of solitude, and another day for an adventure. It was now that my good companion, the lovely Miss Joy, decided to take a tourist bus ride to Mount Dicta in the mountains of Crete. We couldn't afford the luxury of a 4x4, so we took the tourist coach. Very good it was as well, and not expensive, and I recommend it. You'll have a bit of a shock as you go up the mountains though, because if you look out of your right hand window, it's a sheer drop and hairpin bends. But eventually we got to Mount Dicta, or we got to the Lasiti Plateau, and I recommend that while you're locked in, like I am, and the rest of the world, you can Google map it. The Lasiti Plateau and the Mount Dicta mountain is really a large volcano. Some 20 million years ago, it was an active volcano. It died the death, and the cauldron in the middle filled up with water. It's very big. It filled up with water, and as the years went by, the water found its way out, and it trickled out the side of the mountain, and you ended up with a flat, fertile plain of thousands of years of debris, mud. And on this wall, on where Mount Dicta is, you look over the Lasiti Plateau, and it's surrounded by high cliffs. And what is important is the olives in Crete, which are like thistles everywhere, they never climbed up the top of this volcanic crater. They never got down into it. The trees that are in there are completely different, and they are important to our later deductions. So the lovely Miss Joy and I, we took a mule, because it's a long walk up the mountain from the plateau below to the mountain in that crater wall. And we went down this abyss, and it's as big as St. Paul's Cathedral. It's massive. And we were contemplating what it must have been like to have lived in there, and so went down. And believe you me, the temperature never changed. It was nice and cool all the way down, and down you went. There were pools of clear blue water dripping down from the ceiling, fresh water. So somebody could have lived in there quite comfortably during the colds of the Cretan winters. And what I did notice on the right-hand side as you went down was a beautiful flat area which one could have made a nice camp on, a nice abode. But from the ceiling had collapsed onto it a vast slab of rock that had fallen down straight onto it. So what was ever onto there had been there undisturbed for a long time. And more on that later. So what do we do about the Cretan Zeus? He's not to be confused with the Olympian Zeus. The Olympian Zeus comes later. Zeus was, the Cretan Zeus was never considered to be a god. It was said that he was born a man and he died a man. But the people who he looked after up there, had made him into a god. Like Caesar was made into a god, like Cleopatra was made into a goddess, like pharaohs were made into a god. It wasn't necessarily they were some deity who could work magic, or not magic, miracles, for want of a better word. He was a normal man, but apparently he'd been a lawgiver. He'd brought law to Crete. And what I gather from later research, which we did, is that the young Zeus, the young Cretan Zeus, had gone to Canaan. And he brought back a maiden called Europa, of which Europe gets her name from. And he had it away with her. And she gave him a son called Minos. But, yeah, and it also says that he disguised himself as a white bull, and she got on his back, and he came across the sea back to Crete. I think that was the name of his ship, the White Bull. And she got on his ship. He convinced her to come on his ship, and he'd run off with her. And nevertheless, I don't know if they were happily ever after or not. But Zeus's parents were Gaia, a lady called Gaia, and his father was called Cronus. And we're now well into the Bronze Age. The Iron Age hasn't arrived yet. We're in the Bronze Age. And legend has it that Cronus had a bad habit of eating his children. I don't know how true that is, where there was cannibalism, but I should imagine if the guy was on the top of his team, the head of the tribe, or the head of the tribe, he might not have wanted a youngster, his young son, to be after the throne. So there could be something in that he'd bumped off his children. Either way, Gaia disguises young Zeus, and his devotees, we are told, beat their bronze swords to drown out the baby's cries so that Cronus can't hear them. Zeus grows up, and well, we don't quite know what he did, but I'm going to take a guess at it from what the Bible says he did. Now you're going to say, what the heck has the Bible got to do with this? Well, I ask you to just bear with me a bit longer. So Zeus dies. And he dies probably about 1600. And something happens in 1600 that is not astounding. It must have been awe-inspiring. Santorini erupts. Santorini erupts and blows, I think it's 120 kilometers of earth and rock, and makes this vast crater, which you can Google map again. It's the crater still there. In the middle, you'll see the baby volcano growing back out again. And that must have, it wiped out the Minoan civilization as we knew the Minoans. They certainly went down a peg or two in status. They'd lost their fleet. Now I put it to you, my learned friends, how do they explain this? Well, they explain this, that there are two gods. There's the young Zeus, the young Cretan Zeus, and his father, Cronus. The Romans have turned that and called it Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter being the Greek word for, the Roman word for Zeus. And Saturn is the Roman word for Cronus. And these two, son and father, were fighting. And if we read what Hesiod says in this fighting, It's a volcanic eruption in full blast. And if you'll give me a little break, I will read it to you. Hesiod was a contemporary to Homer, circa 800 BC. In writing his Theogonomy, he records the birth of the gods and the conflict between Zeus and the old gods, the Titans, the clash of the Titans. The Titan gods and those born to Cronus and those whom Zeus brought to light from the gloom of the earth, fearful and powerful ones with overbearing strength, indicated until that god Zeus had until that very moment in time had been a single deity. Both sides, these engaged the Titans in grim slaughter with sheer cliffs in their stalwart hands. Both sides displayed a feat of main force, and the boundless sea roared terribly around about. The earth crashed loudly. The broad sky quaked and groaned. Olympus was shaken to its very foundations by the onrush of the immortals. The heavy tremor from their feet reached mighty Tartarus, and the shrill din of indescribable onset and the powerful bombardment. So it was when they discharged their woe-laden missiles at each other. Zeus held in his strength no longer. Straight forth his lungs were filled with fury, and he began to display his full might. From heaven and from Olympus together he came with thundering lightning flashes, and bolts flew thick and fast from his stalwart hands, and thunder and lightning trailing supernatural flames. All around the life-bearing earth trembled as it burned, and the vast woodlands cracked loudly on either side. The whole land was seething, as well as the streams of the Oceanus, the undraining sea. The hot blast enveloped the Titans. The indescribable flames reached the divine sky, and the sparkling flare of thunderbolts dazzled the strongest eyes. It seemed just as if the earth and broad heavens were about coming together, and in addition, the winds magnified the quaking, and the dust and the thunder, and the lightning and the smoking bolts. By Hesiod's time, and the recording of events were beginning to take place. Before then, everything had been verbal. So here we have Zeus taking over his father. And it was the Santorini eruption that did it. Nobody has, even now, seen eruption as great as that. Krakatoa, who blew up in 1880, I think, AD, left us with 33,000 dead. So, and that was nowhere near to Santorini. Gosh, forgive an old man. So here we are, we've got Zeus and Cronus, and it seems as though Zeus has survived. But if I'm coming from Crete, what is the religion on Crete? The religion on Crete is, and I'll show you some pictures of this later, is the bull, the great bull, and a lady who is naked, holding two snakes, semi-naked. Her busts are exposed, and she's holding two snakes in her hand. The bull, I think, represents the great roaring of the bull In my last book I said, in those days, from Genesis, in those days, giants lived in the earth. And I'm saying, as Evans said, you could hear the roaring of the bulls when the earth quaked. So I'll now go and get you these pictures of what the Minoans worshipped, the Minoans of the coast. And we must get a clear understanding of this. The Minoans of the coast were all seafaring people. The Minoans inland were all farmers. They couldn't have got down to the sea. It would have taken them a couple of weeks to walk there. So they couldn't. They'd have stayed in their fortress, if you like. And they never got the tsunami that would have come to them. They'd have been clear. That rock might have come down. I told you in the cave. That rock might have come down. And I think that great rock did come down on that time. And that's another story. No, it's not a story. It's one I'll add on later. This is a Minoan priestess with the snakes. Whether they will have any impact on it, I don't know, but snakes. The great bulls of the Minoan civilization, of which bullfighting today probably comes from. In Portugal, they do the acrobatics still to this day. In Spain, they don't. They use the cloak. But in Portugal, they do the acrobatics over this bull. And here you can see the Minoans and that hairstyle that comes in front of the ear. I never did quite fathom out who was the god of the Minoans as a sort of statue. The lady with the bosoms was a priestess of that cult, and so was the bull. In fact, the bull and the image of the bull played a big part in the Minoan religious ceremonies. But the main thing was, it was not anywhere near like the cult of the Olympian Zeus, which came after the Cretan Zeus. So, if the tsunami from Santorini's eruption smashed into the north coast of Crete, which is directly in front of it, it's going to wipe out the fleet. It's not going to affect the people in the mountainous regions of Crete. So if there is a new deity or a new lawgiver starting up in Crete, and it's in those mountains, which is obviously archaeologically shows it was, then they can turn around and say, well, our God's better than your God. Your God has destroyed you, ours has made us survive. And you can see a conflict beginning to appear. So much so that the Cretan Zeus becomes stronger and stronger. The belief of one God who's all powerful, a lawgiver, a thrower of thunderbolts, if you're naughty, gets transferred over to Greece, where it becomes the Olympian Zeus. It's rather like Catholics becoming Protestants. And when you have that happen, you have trial and you have a lot of strife, people killing people off. As everybody knows, when two religions bump into each other, there's a war on. And so the Minoan, the Cretan Zeus develops into the Greek Zeus, the Olympian Zeus. And of course, those people of Crete or of Greece didn't quite understand this single deity. So they gave the Olympian Zeus helpers, Ares, the god of war, Juno, the lady that thought, not Juno, she's Athena in Greek mythology, she's Athena, and Juno is the Roman version of her. She is the thinker, she is the cunning one, and Athens is named after her. And Venus, of course, of love. Everybody likes a bit of love, so Venus comes into it. And it's a bit like Jesus, really, because when Jesus was the Son of God, people couldn't quite understand how they could go and ask Jesus, say, I've lost my shoes, or I'm in love with such and such a girl. So the Christian religion brought in saints to do those things for you. You don't upset Jesus. You go to St. Michael if you want a war. Go to St. Michael and he'll fight for you. So we now have the Cretan Zeus. He's been dead probably 20 years, but he couldn't have been there longer. Otherwise, the Minoan gods or the Minoan priesthood, they'd have wiped him out. They'd have come up there and sifted him out. They'd been allowed to develop slowly because they weren't a big problem in that mountain fastness of the mountains of Crete. So what happens next? I'm looking at the Bible. True, we haven't got God being born in the Bible, but we have got another thing where God is angry with the children, angry with the people, I should say. And Eve has done something to do with apples and a snake. And of course, God throws them out of Eden, that Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, as the Jews call it in their Torah, the Garden of Eden. So what could the Garden of Eden be? Well, let's have a look at it in the Bible. And God made a garden eastwards. Now, my detectives, I give you the problem. If God made a garden eastwards, where was God? He wasn't upwards, because he'd have made it downwards. He wasn't downwards, otherwise he'd have made it upwards. He wasn't westwards, otherwise he'd have made it... Sorry, he wasn't northwards, otherwise he'd have made it southwards. If he made it eastwards, then God has got to be directly opposite westwards. And in that vast crater, that is the Lasiti Plateau, when on the bottom of it is the Lasiti Plateau with the cliffs coming up, and on this side, me if you like, is that cave of Zeus. And if it was Zeus, and he made the Garden of Eden eastwards, then eastwards from that cave entrance is the Lasiti Plateau. And I will show you pictures of the Lasiti Plateau. The Lasiti Plateau. You can see in the distance the mountains rising up from this flat plateau, which is the rim of this vast crater, which goes all the way around us. And down below are these beautiful little gardens. It's a place of many gardens, many windmills. All of them putting down little windmills to collect the water that's at the bottom of this fertile soil. And of course, when it rains, it would like to fill the volcano up again, but of course there is a rivers leading out of it. Interesting, I counted 3 rivers, and you'll see why I bothered to count them. And God made a garden of pleasure. That's what Eden means. Eden means pleasure. And through it ran 4 rivers. And there he planted many trees that were good to eat and good to see. Well, the one thing about the Lasiti Plateau is that the olive hasn't climbed those walls, hasn't got over. These fields inside have trees, they have lots of trees, and they are apple and almonds. Good to eat and good to see. See is when you've got apple blossom and almond blossom. I don't know where almonds came from, but they certainly didn't come from Crete. Crete's an island. We know that apples came from Canaan. And the question is, did young Zeus, that lawgiver, that guy that they made a god, when he brought Europa back from Canaan, did he bring apple seeds, apple trees? We don't know. But we've got apples there and almonds. So I was inquisitive about this Garden of Eden. And here I've got a place that's full of gardens with the little windmills pumping away. So I was hoping this is the Lasiti Plateau, means the place of many gardens. I was hoping. So the young, beautiful Miss Joy and I went down to the Heraclean Museum, and later on, of course, and met a professor there, and we asked him what the Lasiti means. We'd asked the locals, and we don't know what it means. It's always Lasiti. So we went to this professor, and he said, oh yes, it means many shrubs or many trees. And I thought, well, there goes my wonderful idea of many gardens. And then a thunderclap, it struck me. And God made Garden of Eden, and there he planted many trees. The Lasiti Plateau, I say, is the Garden of Eden. So we've got Adam and Eve now being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Except it ain't Adam and Eve. The translation of that in Hebrew is Adam and Chava. Now we can't say Chava, even I'm not saying it right. So we've turned that into Adam and Eve. But in Hebrew, anybody that's called Adam in this country or any country is, it means man. And I like to talk to people in their language, even something a little bit. And for example, good man in Turkish is Adam. E being good, Adam, man, good man. So it doesn't mean a guy called Adam, and it doesn't mean a girl called Eve. It means a multitude. And in our Bible and in the Torah, it said Eve, the mother of everything that lived. So there was man, and then everybody else, kangaroos, lions, giraffes, a lot, is what Eve made. So Eve is really Mother Nature. So we aren't getting two people being expelled out of Eden. We're getting a multitude. And they ain't dying, they're being expelled into exile. And Santorini, Agratia, when they excavated, didn't find a single body, not a single bone, not a single corpse. They'd all legged it. They'd all heard the rumbling of Santorini's volcano and left before it really did blow its top. But the people on Crete, of course, got the full whack of it. So, carrying on with the Bible, we find that I'm determined not to lose the point, and I've lost it. Sorry, we'll come back. Yes, got it. It's come back into this grey matter. We've got, after Adam and Eve, in the scriptures, in the Bible, it says, and Zeth. and there came Zeth. I think they said he's the son of Adam and Eve. Well, Zeth is an Egyptian word. It's a god, actually. It's the god that killed Osiris. And Zeth in Egypt is known as chaos. Zeth is referred to as chaos. And the Minoans certainly traded long before Santorini blew her top with Egypt. So I'm sure they were familiar with the word Seth. And so after Adam and Eve comes Seth, comes chaos. Spot on. Then we've got, when two religions clash, we've always got a war going on. Somebody's going to persecute somebody, crucify and burn them, don't know what. There's always going to be conflict when two gods meet. And so I think that after the chaos came the reconstruction by the Minoans, and by this time the Cretans, Zeus's devotees, are saying, hey, our God's better than your God. Your God went and ruined all your, or our God did it. He ruined all your fleet, but we were left perfect. So it's your God that's wrong. And they said, no, it's you. And they persecuted them. And we get this, next we get in the scriptures in the Holy Bible and in the Quran and in the Torah, is the story of Abel and Canaan. Now I put it to you, my learned friends, both of them go to make their sacrifice to God. And God accepts the sacrifice of Abel, which is cattle, sheep, goats. But he won't accept the sacrifice of Canaan, which is crops. Apples, pears, potatoes. Well, they ain't got potatoes. Potatoes hadn't arrived in Europe for another 3,000 years. But whatever the greenery was, peas, I don't know. But the priesthood, and it's got to be the priesthood, not God, didn't accept. And that's a bit of coronavirus for you. Didn't accept Canaan's sacrifice. And Canaan got so angry he went and slew Abel. Or was it Abel slew Cain? And they put a curse on Cain. And people think, the curse of Cain. He got a curse on him. No, he had a good curse on him. God put a curse on him that if anybody was to hurt Cain, they would suffer 7 times more pain than they gave to Cain. Now, why is that? Cain's just killed Abel. And why are they protecting? Why is somebody protecting Cain? Because he's just murdered Abel. That doesn't make sense. Unless what the priesthood is trying to tell Cain is don't buy crops. Don't plant crops. If you plant crops, you're going to get persecuted. I'll put it to you this way. You're a farmer and you put down a couple of acres of potatoes. And somebody owes you money. Or somebody doesn't like you. And they come and raid your field. You can only run away and you leave all your goodies there. You leave your money there. But if you're a farmer who has his sheep and his goats and his cattle, and your enemies come to you, you can get your stick out and shoo them on. And you, with your bank balance on the hoof, can leg it. And I think they're trying to tell Cain, we love you, we want you as one of our devotees, but please change over from farming of agriculture to the farming of animals. And Cain refuses and goes to live in the land of Nod, I think, and we hear no more of Cain. We then get the patriarchs, but that's another story. So far, I hope you've liked it. It doesn't mean to say that God was the God, but it doesn't mean to say it's doing a damn good job of saying it. That if I have shown that Noah came from Crete, then the Cretan Zeus, his God, and that Cretan Zeus, of course, will become one of the greatest gods the world has ever known. The Olympian Zeus, that the Greeks followed, the Romans followed, and right up to the 3rd century BC, how many 2,000 years they've been following the Cretan and Olympian Zeus and the vast monuments they put up to him. Then in 330 odd AD, under the emperor, Constantine, the one who built Constantinople, he allowed Christianity become a recognised religion. And it wasn't long before they trampled on the old gods and had them thrown out. And they expelled the old gods, and I like this a little bit, they expelled the old gods to the outer reaches of space, the cold, desolate reaches of space. There those gods now reside. Mars, the god of war, Venus, the god of love, Jupiter, the king of the gods, Neptune, his old daddy Cronus, Mercury, the messenger of the gods. They're all out there. But if you listen carefully on the evening breeze, you'll hear the gods are laughing, because one of them didn't go. And that's the God of Noah, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, and the God of the Jews, and the Father of Jesus. Thank you very much. See you next week. Hope you're all feeling well. And I hope to see you all here next week. None of you fail. None of this coronavirus finaging. Don't say you couldn't come because you got this virus. I won't have it. Thank you very much. Bye.